Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am here with another magical guest, and I'm excited about this one because often my guests are people that I've known. I've had several of my TEDx people recording, I've had people that have been in my community, in my orbit for a while, and this one is a little extra rooted in synchronicity because Sarah Bush, who's with me today, found me and reached out because she felt a sense of resonance in what she's doing and what I'm doing. And so we had a virtual tea to assess resonance, and now I'm excited to get to know you more through this conversation and share your brilliance with my community. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. And as we often start the introduction, I have a somewhat formal introduction I'd like to share. And then I'm going to invite Sarah to let me know what I missed and share the human that is in this space today, which is beyond the bio. So, Sarah is a mixed media artist and writer living in Taos, New Mexico with her husband and two cats. And at the heart of her work is a deep curiosity about creativity as sacred practice and the role of the human imagination in shaping a more beautiful future. Through her art, writing, and the way she lives, she's exploring what it means to be all in on life, to deepen our relationship with nature, and to ground both creativity and activism in love. Her vision is a world where living in balance with the rest of life becomes our human priority and where imagination helps reconnect us to what's possible, even when we can't yet see the results. Imaginal change.
Yes, exactly. I was like, oh,
Welcome.
she talks about imaginal change too. Yes. Well, thank you so much for that. And yeah, I'm an artist. I and our two kitties, we just got them like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So they're a little bonded pair, and I'm obsessed with them. And yeah, so I've just been an artist and a designer and a writer my whole life. And Um, over time, I've just become more and more committed to the idea of the imagination and, you know, how what we can do as individuals when people feel sort of helpless or like they don't, what could they possibly do to make a difference?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's lots of doorways we can walk through with this conversation. I'm curious, have you always had this knowing around imagination being valuable? Or is that something you had to sort of reclaim in your life?
well, I feel like I've always felt this sounds funny, but always very close to my imagination. I felt like my imagination was like my best friend. And then several years ago, I got involved in a spiritual community where we would talk about the imagination in a broader way. And I loved that. And even in that spiritual community, I felt like people would be like, I don't have much of an imagination. I was like, what? Yes, you do. What are you talking about? And that really made me start to think more consciously about, the power of the human imagination
Yeah.
and and the fact that each of us has this power,
Mhm.
and that cultivating your imagination, just becoming more conscious of your imagination, embracing it, and then thinking like, what is it that how can I convince people that their imagination is important?
Mhm. Yeah. I'm curious because I can imagine people listening. Whenever we get even close to creativity, people tend to have story that shuts things down. And so I find it's helpful to get kind of granular and then we can use that as a springboard. How do you define imagination?
Well, I think of the imagination, and it's funny because I don't think imagination and creativity are exactly the same thing, but they are certainly intertwined. And I agree with you that, I used to do creativity coaching in Manhattan, and I would be networking. And as soon as I would say that I was a creativity coach, I felt like people would sort of panic and then need to explain to me as fast as they could that they personally were not creative. Like, I don't know if they thought I was going to make them be creative while we're having coffee. I didn't know. I thought, wow. That's so intense. And I used to design, I had many different types of design jobs, but I had a design job where I worked for a company where I like make projects so people could come in and make whatever they wanted. And I had people say to my face, oh, creativity's for children. And I thought, wow. And so, I think of the imagination, like I talk about it as like these sort of four steps, like these four aspects of the imagination, because I think most people just think your imagination is when you are creative or when you've invented something or when you um, are making things up. Like on the flip side, on the negative side, oh, you're just making that up. Or they even say to themselves, I'm making that up. Like, and not even really trusting that inner voice. And that part, I think yes, like, and I often will say, and even on the Pink Teacup, my newsletter, art is a subset of creativity, a subset. Creativity is creativity is like the originating force of the universe. The universe is constantly creating itself. We're all creating our lives every minute of the day, even though we're not really kind of embracing that. And then, and art making, sure, I'm creative. And it's kind of funny because I was raised by two people who were very different from each other. My father was a football coach and my mother was an artist.
Mm.
And in some ways, my father was more creative than my mother. My mother was very artistically talented, but she also had a lot of rules about her creativity and the way to be creative. And my dad was just more of an out of the box thinker. And so it's like, well, really, in a way, he was more creative because he allowed himself more.
Oh, I think that's such a good point to highlight for people because one, teasing apart creativity and imagination and creativity, right? Like the idea that creativity and art are mushed together, but creativity is a lens on life. And I make up imagination is almost like a pathway to take us there. Like what else is possible? It helps us get out of the box. And um I love that distinction of creativity is an approach to living versus a product you make or a skill you perfect. I was talking with a friend not long ago who is a highly trained artist, and she has had to step away after decades because she realized she wasn't as creative in her approach to art as she wanted to be with her life because of that fine artist training. And it sounds like your mom. She wants to bring that creativity in a more broad sense. And that actually was a place it got constricted, strangely.
Yes, that's right. And and in a funny way, maybe it's because like being artistically talented or having aesthetic, that that's not really always the same as
No.
creativity.
Yeah.
And there's people who, to me, I'll think like, oh, you're kind of making the same painting over and over again here. Like access, and then using your art not as a product or a brand, but as a pathway for understanding, a pathway of connection. And that is, to me, really what the imagination is offering us. And that so much, like the ways that people are in touch with their imaginations to me, generally is around their fear and their worries. Like when you're worrying, you're using your imagination pretty well.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, like the most common use of our imaginations. And that's the part where, okay, that is definitely using one's imagination, but you can cultivate the other parts of your imagination, the flip side of that, just by consciously giving yourself permission to explore what that might be like and then think like, oh, I couldn't think of very much. Well, you just keep doing that and it gets stronger. It's in some ways it can be like creativity, I would often say is like a muscle.
Yeah.
And
And also
and I
being like,
used to have to design products on a deadline, and I
yeah.
didn't have to be inspired to do that because my creativity was not connected to my mood or how well I felt. You know, that was a different thing that I had access to.
Mhm.
So it's just
Yeah,
it's so fascinating to me.
yeah, imagination. I mean, I feel like we could just stir this pot for hours together and be like, and this, and I wonder about this. But what keeps coming up for me, since I don't identify as an artistic person, aesthetics matter to me, and I
Yeah.
crafty, creative, whatever in those ways. But I'm more creative in that sense that it sounds like your dad was. Like I'm thinking about what else is possible, but imagination is the language of intuition in my work. It's the
Yes.
language of the voice that is so beyond our conditioning. And it's the language of the quantum field. It's the language of what we can put energy toward to conjure. It's a very powerful source in this intangible way that is really cool to imagine. Like, what's possible if we believe that there's this imaginal intelligence inside and then this imaginal potential outside when the two connect. Holy cow, what's the world we can co-create?
That's right. And, one way I think it's helpful to think about what you just said, which is so giant, is like using our imagination as our spiritual practice or as
Yes.
a part of our spiritual practice and realizing that, and as a pathway to love, like that. I've been thinking so much about this, that Teilhard de Chardin quote. Um, Someday after mastering, I have it here because I've been thinking about it so much. Someday after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. And yes, I think, yes, it, like love is not a sentiment, it's an undiscovered force. And to love at scale, we have to use our imaginations to get ourselves there, or like to, as you were saying, like when we want to co-create a new world, we have to be able to imagine it. And we have to trust our imaginations to do that. Like that point you made about intuition, like, yes, like that's that thing of I'm making this up. No, you're accessing. Like what happens if you trust that voice? It doesn't, you're not out on a limb there. It's more like, or things aren't out of your control just because you just decide to trust that voice, to trust your intuition. And that thing about, like, to me, that's why one would cultivate one's imagination to enhance one's ability to love and to help humans evolve in that, toward that process.
I mean, okay, like we did the podcast. There we go. You took us all to church. I I got chills because I think that is such a powerful way to think about it, that imagination helps us gain access to, in my words, I would say, what love wants for us that we can't consciously want for ourselves because of our conditioning, our wounding, our anxieties, whatever it might be. And daring to imagine and dream up a more loving path for ourselves as individuals, for the world. I think we've been in such a logical culture that the power of that has been devalued tremendously. And that's part of why we're using our imagination to try and control things through the lens of our fear, like imagining worst case scenarios so that we're prepared.
Yeah.
But
So we're ready. We're
we're ready
ready.
when all that terrible shit happens, and and then we're giving energy to more terrible shit rather
That's
than,
right.
and this has been something definitely central in my life because I grew up very much like that. How do I protect against the worst case scenario so I'm not chronically disappointed, whatever.
Yeah.
And building that muscle of I wonder what love wants for me. I wonder what else is possible. I wonder what the most magical outcome is. That's part of why I'm so excited about this trip I'm about to go on. I mentioned before our call with my son is that's how I travel. I wonder what magic wants to happen for and with me today. I wonder how I'm going to get to love up on a stranger today. I want, and that's imagination. Wondering
That's
takes
right.
us into that. And it's fun. Oh my gosh, it's fun.
That's right. And I love also what you're saying there because it's like in a way we could say imagination is how we help love move
Oh, mm,
because we can't love what we can't imagine. And like even in like when I talk about my framework, when I talk about like creation and connection and becoming and sovereignty, I think connection is imagining as, and that is empathy. And that is an expression of love. To empathize is to imagine how someone else feels and feel connected to them and have sympathy and for that situation, like for what someone's going through.
Mhm.
And that is imagination. That's love in action there. That's love moving.
Mhm.
Or, when we talk about imagination as becoming, I think, well, that is manifestation. But manifestation doesn't necessarily mean dragging something towards you with your will. It's becoming who you want to be. Who is that person? Like that's when Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. That's manifestation. That's become that, become peace. Like, oh, that'll keep me busy for the rest of my life.
Yeah, embodied leadership.
And
That's why that's the term I keep using is, I've seen and been in activist conversations for a lot of my life, and I've seen them be some of the most self-abandoning people while they're saying they want a loving world. And I get it. I've been trained in martyrdom. I got good at it for a while. I get it. And there's a disconnect on the unconscious level of our shared humanity when we're saying one thing and being another. But when there's congruence, all you have to do is walk in a room and you start impacting people. Like be the love was a mantra I chose, I guess, probably over a decade ago. And it was just so simple, but it was like, how can I be the love forward with myself in every interaction? Like just as an orienting factor, because I was good at being the fear for a lot of my life. I was good at that. So
yes,
being nice, but being the fear and trying to manage life and control life. And it's a whole different felt sense when I think we're kind of circling in this idea of what are we orienting to as we live and work and um, carry the intention of being in service to something bigger in the world. Like, what's our
that's
orienting?
right. That's right. And that the imagination is there for you on a personal level and even a private way to support you and to help you in that journey. Like it's always accessible. And just like that, and then just like that ability to love is accessible, you just have to find it. Or where, when we often are going to bump up against where we find that hard. And then, we have our imagination and our, I guess, commitment to get back on the horse. And when you are in that loving place, like when you're being the love, when you were saying that, I was thinking, and also that, you start to have a lot more mercy for yourself. And when you have more mercy for yourself, it's so like you automatically have more mercy for everyone around you. And I think even like a lot of women who are trained to kind of be aware of everyone else's feelings kind of don't realize that, when you are kind to yourself, that's you're going to ripple that out. And you won't be a martyr. It won't be that you're doing things in kindness that you resent or something.
Mhm. It's performative. I mean, I realized at a point in my own journey, I was very good at like being good in the world, but I wasn't being kind and compassionate to myself. There was a, and that means I was kind of performing it. I had to get real with myself. I wasn't really being it. And
Yeah.
so my practice was like, okay, what's love showing me about where I'm missing it? Like
Yes.
because that's my take on love is not some sort of light, fluffy Valentine's card energy. Love wants us to be who we are. Love wants us to be in connection. Love wants us to heal. And that has to show us some things that are kind of uncomfy sometimes. Um and like how
That's
do we meet that? And I make up that your work and my work is about navigating that gritty in between, that place of I don't know, and using imagination or art to get out of that known stuckness, that known story. I don't know. I'm not finding the right words, but I think
yeah, yeah. I
I
know what you're
almost see like
saying.
chutes and ladders, like the bridges that get us out of those ditches. One of them is imagination.
That's right. And sometimes our imaginations also need like a container. Like I was thinking, like when I'm making art, it can be a container for that process. And I just taught a little workshop on last couple of months in my creative change makers group. We making these fun little cootie catcher toys and expressing our political points of view. And um, after doing that a couple of times, I thought, I feel like a lot of people are feeling a kind of civic grief right now. And that maybe we could make one that's like a writing a letter, like Dear America, like it breaks my heart when. And we can get like I wanted to provide people a concrete mechanism for like because I think this is what I do with my art all the time. Like how do you make your feelings into art? How do you make them connect to others in a more universal way beyond like the diary entry part of it that might be too raw. And what I loved about doing that together is that first, so we did like a free write, we're doing this and we're pouring out these letters. And a lot of it initially is all the frustration and anger and things like that that people have. And then it's like by doing that process, you find out, but what is it that I want for my country? What do I want to have happen? And that it's like you can't, it's a spiritual bypass to pretend those feelings don't exist. But it's like it though, like by moving through them and imagining all the different ways. Like someone was like, well, I first brought up healthcare because she had to go to the hospital a lot and it was such a terrible experience. And so a lot of that first iteration in the letter was about that. And then I was sort of sharing my process so people could see the example. And then she was like, right, like, what do I want the hospital to be? And then, like, what if hospitality, hospital, like all these connections were being made? Like, what if it was like a parlor, warm, like, I'm so happy you're here. Sit down. I just want to make you feel better. Like, and that's now the imagination is creating and envisioning. And then it's like the role to me of art in that situation is create or craft is to create a container for that. So we made a little toy because most people, I've like so many people have used that toy as a kid that when I hand them out, they're like, oh, I made these. So, there was like, and touching it and looking and then having like this personal expression or a vision, it's so interesting that part of it, like where if people are thinking, I don't know how would I do this? Like connecting your imagination and like even when you cook a meal, you can fill that your container of love that you feel for your family when you're cooking them a meal, and imagining that into the food. That's almost what a prayer is over the food, thanking the food, thanking that. And I just love kind of making clear that that's what our imaginations are are like that pathway there, it's offering to us.
Yeah, and I think I want to reflect something I'm hearing that's important for listeners to hear is that there's something, and I've seen this in my own experience and work, that creating safety enough for imagination to move. I think a lot of times we expect people to be able to imagine a better future. But if their nervous system is so tight and protected and full of gunk that they're suppressing, imagination is not safe to move. Intuition is not safe to reveal itself. And what I hear in what you're saying is not only are you using normalizing that, okay, let's move this part, the muckiness, the uncomfortable feelings, the truth that's unfiltered, but let's do it in community. Let's do it from a place of play and pleasure. And then let's see what's there. And that's what's really cool to me about imagination and intuition is it just emerges. When there's safety, when there's the gunk is moved, it's kind of unstoppable. It just wants to raise its hand. It's our deepest wisdom. It's our most tender longings, right? And that tenderness requires a safe container, as you said. And to try and force it before we've created that container within ourselves or in our communities actually can create more stress and more shame because people don't understand why they can't access theirs.
That is such a great point. And the safety issue is so huge. I've even been doing this like funny little meditation at night when I can't sleep, and I'll say, I'm willing to feel safe. I'm willing to feel safe because I am like physically safe. And sometimes, like in our political world, I think people can be feeling unsafe when they actually aren't unsafe. And that is kind of our imagination telling us stories. And those can be connected to trauma and other things that are really, you know, serious and legitimate. But also that part about kind of even unpacking a feeling of lack of safety, or like even acknowledging that you don't feel safe. I think like it's almost like this underneath thing that people are used to feeling, and they don't know that they don't feel safe. And then it's interesting for me to unpack like when am I actually unsafe and when am I almost not feeling safe from like a habit, almost an imaginal habit there.
Yeah. And, I think also culturally we get confused between safety and comfort. And
Yes,
there's a whole thing of, also learning how to figure out how we feel safe. Some people feel more safe to unpack their stuff and reflect alone. I realized I have to be in relationship to access that deeper stuff. I've wished I could just cry in a closet before, but I'm not that person. And finding what it is that creates our sense of inner stability and safety, regardless of what's going on in the world, while not at all diminishing or denying what's going on in the world. It's that both and. I just did
that's
a
right.
TEDx and it was about how do we meet these moments of uncertainty and instability. And it's like, you know, inner nervous system regulation, community ship, and connection to something bigger. It doesn't matter what it is, creates this sense of anchoring so that then we can look at all the stuff that actually isn't fair, isn't safe. And we can kind of alchemize and metabolize our experience within that, our longings within that, our fears within that, our imagination. It's a very nuanced skill set that I think most of us weren't taught. We're gathering it, and that's why I love this podcast. That's why I love this conversation, and the work you're doing is I think there's a rising of voices that are kind of pooling their skills and thoughts and perspectives on a big old table and going, take what you need, try some things on, let's like figure out what works for you because this is the long game.
That's right. This is the long game. That's so perfectly stated. And also, when you can move past those, I really love what you're saying about safety. When you move a little bit farther in, where you feel a little safer, then you can discover that your imagination can help keep you safe
Yes.
and
Yes.
can increase your safety because on a couple different levels, like your imagination, like what I think is so powerful about creativity and imagination is that people who have a strong imagination and who are connected to their creativity have more personal agency. Like you don't just have a feeling of agency, it increases your agency. It like literally increases your agency. You know, you're harder to control because you know what you think and you can think of something else. And that is such a powerful thing. And then when we feel like our imaginations get hijacked by outside forces, we can use our imaginations to get us out of that hijacking. And that's, like I'll imagine into my sovereignty in order to regain control of my imagination. So when someone hijacks your imagination, you've handed it to them. Oh, you're insinuating scary things, and now I'm going to fill in all the blanks and make it really bad, according to me. And that's the insinuator knows this. That's why they insinuate. And then, but when you use like you can actually take back your imagination with your imagination.
Mhm. Well, and one of the things that blew my mind when I got somatically trained, because background as a therapist, things can get very mental in that traditional paradigm. And so I was always looking on the edges for what else? How can we access this deeper something that I know, sense, and feel? And I do a lot of guided journey work with people now, and that's what I call it, where I'm channeling based on kind of connecting to their energy and my own intuition, but it's a guided experience for them to imagine something. And it could be everything from sensations in the body to, you know, a safe space in their mind, whatever, but the body and the nervous system responds as if it's real. It is the biggest hack that people don't know that you can literally imagine yourself into a different state of being. That doesn't mean you bypass what's real. It means you integrate a new story into what's real. And it's like the reality that's overwhelming integrates with an internal experience that's better, safer, more appealing, more nourished, whatever it might be. And then from there, those two parts, the capacity to be and move forward just is so expansive. And I kind of want everyone to know your imagination can change your being. That's within minutes.
Yes.
It's wild. Your neurology changes. We think we have to change our context, like we have to change the situation before we can feel better. And we want to change a lot of situations, no doubt. And the embodied leadership part, okay, great. That's overwhelming. I know my part. I can contribute this, but now how can I be it through my own imaginal intelligence, my own somatic restructuring, whatever. It's kind
That's
of
right. Like that's that becoming thing that you
yeah,
can imagine yourself in another way. You can imagine, or you can return yourself,
yeah,
in your body to a place of safety
yeah.
that is its birthright.
And that's a flex in this world to be able to say the world is a dumpster fire and I'm going to go take 5 minutes and create this little pod of felt safety before I get back to it. That's a really I just think it's an underrated skill and talent to be able to cultivate that in the midst of, energies and pressures that are very overwhelming.
And also that it matters. Like
Mhm.
I think for people, it's hard to give themselves things like that. Like the world is on fire and I can't give myself. It's too self-indulgent for me to attend to myself. And instead, it's like learning to understand that when you are healing yourself, you're healing the whole thing. And I think it's really interesting, even just to bring that, a conscious awareness to that. So, like, there are many people healing themselves or doing their best to, let go of the past, or however they might think about that. But also realizing that the work they're doing is not just for themselves. Like I think in our culture, we just think in terms of our individuality, but it's like, oh, I'm healing myself and I'm a part of the evolution of humanity. That my work is connected to the biggest picture.
Yeah.
And so when I feel like that's just a hard leap, like when you're saying it's underrated, I was thinking that's why it just feels like little old me. What a
Well, I do think that's why I've done high intimacy groups for years, is because when we have these ecosystems of care and healing and transformation and intention, we feel it. And I've said for years, what comes in for one is offered to everyone. That came from my shamanic training years ago. Like, and I feel that, if there's a gift or an insight or a healing moment that comes in, it's actually dispersed. It's almost like there's this invisible web that holds us all. That because of our culture, we've taught it's just very bootstrappy and it's us against the world and nobody is connected to us and we're all alone and all that. But that's actually never true. We feel each other constantly. Neuroscience proves it through things like mirror neurons. Quantum theory proves it through quantum physics. And when we feel that in these, like, one person in a family heals something, and then all of a sudden mom starts acting different at Christmas. What the hell? Or in a group, everybody is having these up levels. Why? Just because we came into community. Then it's easier, I think, to buy into the idea that our becoming is something that is a contribution to the bigger world. And also, the idea that more suffering eliminates suffering is just, yeah, I'm over. It's part of that martyrdom, like I'm gonna suffer in service of things. Like it actually doesn't help at all
not
for
at
me to
all.
be miserable because you're miserable. If I can be more healed and more joyful and more inspired, I have more energy to give to what matters. And so that's a myth I just want to keep challenging for people. It doesn't help anyone.
That's right. And there are people in the world who are genuinely suffering in ways that
Yes.
are almost like, whew.
Yes.
And like they don't want me to suffer because they don't want to suffer. And it's almost like I almost think of it as my duty, like to find my joy. Like because I have to offer it. Like I can't expect that person over there going through that to find their joy. My goodness.
Yeah.
So I have to offer that.
Yep.
Like I have to realize because the world has always been like that. It's always a mixture of intense suffering and intense joy, and that's the weird thing about being incarnate on the physical plane. Like, okay, here we are. I used to go to a meditation group in Manhattan where basically it'd be like 200 people in a room all chanting in Sanskrit, like I honor the divine within. When you talk about that somatic experience, I was like, I would float down 8th Avenue toward the bus. People would look at me like, huh? Like the energy I got from that many people honoring the divine within
Yeah.
was nuts. And I think also from what you were saying, that's also it becomes real. You believe it because it is somatic.
Yep. Yeah. It's
And
felt.
then it's not an idea.
Yep.
It's in your bones. It's in your body. You know it that way, viscerally.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a conversation, I don't want to get too far into it, but I want to just add on around a reframe on privilege. I think if I have privileges to do healing work, then by God, I need to leverage my privilege to do that and contribute that to the whole because there are many people who are who don't have access to that kind of
That's
support that
right.
I do or that kind of access that this face gets me or whatever, there's a different
It's
story.
almost like a responsibility.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Like, how dare I not contribute a new story to the collective experience if I have access to it? And then, have to watch myself to not get too hard on myself about that. There's a line there around compassion
Yep.
and all that. But I think there's a lot of people with privilege and access who are suffering with rather than feeling that call forth to contribute something different to add
And
to that.
feeling guilty, I think, if they are accessing their joy
Yeah.
and misunderstanding that, like joy isn't even just intense happiness. Joy is much more like love. It's that miracle and the web of life around us, I think, wants us to have it. It is a joy thing, and it wants us to have that,
Yeah.
and finding our place back in the like our balanced place back into the web of life, so crucial.
Mhm. Yeah, and the web of life, I want to circle back to just the core conversation around imagination we've been having. One of the things I love about imagination, it is inherently unique. It is not homogenized. So imagination takes us into human diversity. It takes us into diverse creative contribution because the chances of my imagination and your imagination telling us the same thing while sitting next to each other tuning in, probably not going to be the same. And I think there's something really special about that in a world where we're taught this is how you're successful, this is how you contribute, this is how you're a good person, whatever. All those rules, imagination is like, fuck that.
Yeah.
No, I don't play by that. I'm doing it the way that I'm divinely guided to, which is really exciting.
And then even how we can, like in a community way, build on each other's imaginations.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you collaborate, like one of my favorite collaborations, like a lot of artists, they have a hard time collaborating, and I like to collaborate. And I collaborated on a piece with a friend during COVID, and it was so easy because we were both so relaxed about kind of our imagination. So we would hit an impasse, and we'd be looking at our thing, and I would say, well, when I'm in this situation, I do this. She'd be like, oh, yeah, let's try that. And then like we'd hit another impasse and she'd be like, well, when I'm in this situation, I do this. And that is like sort of a companionship of imagination rather than a competition of imagination.
Yeah.
And that is so possible. Like even in that class I talk, when people are sharing out loud about the evolution of their thinking as they're in their Dear America letters, that's inspiring other people's, imaginations for their own particular thing.
Yeah. This is so good. I can't believe we've already gone through the amount of time we have. And I know we talked about having a little space to get nerdy about human design. So I, I wanted to bring some things up because part of these conversations, my intention is to demystify human design and just bring it into conversation and help affirm what my guests are already doing that's in alignment with their design and maybe offer things that are helpful. And so the first thing that I want to offer is the one thing that you know, but that listeners don't, that you are a manifester type in the human design type. So in our book, we call it the innovating catalyst because it's this energy of creative energy moving out into the world to create impact and change. So no question, you are aligned with that. And the manifestor energy often doesn't want to follow the rules. It's got its own way, and a quick way to piss a manifestor off is to tell them to do it a different way. To restrict the creative flow that wants to move in the way it wants to move. And it's incredibly powerful. I think um I'm in awe of how manifestor energy, it's got a potency. It's got this, like, it's a force, and it's almost like it moves energy like a wave moving in. It's just really incredible as far as its impact. And um the part that you mentioned in our pre-podcast form, that you were like, I don't know about these, like the six and the 2s and the 5s and the 1s. I don't know what that is. I did want to mention your profile. So for those listening, the profile lines, in my mind, they sort of create the essence or the texture of the story we're here to live. Every human design chart has this sort of hero or heroine's journey of becoming. It's got our natural gifts, our natural challenges. I'm not going to go into your actual story in this, but the profile lines show us how that often likes to unfold. And you have a 5-1 profile. And the 5 line is the conscious, the 1 is the unconscious. And I'm going to start with the unconscious because it just makes sense to me to go there first. The 1 line wants a foundation. The 1 line feels security through information. And so I make up, you've probably over your life learned a lot of things about a lot of things and probably had fun
Busted.
doing it. Like the 1 line at its highest expression loves, they're like a voracious learner and it's just fun. It's learning for the fun of learning. The 1 line tips into moving towards kind of burnout when they never feel like they have enough information and they feel like they always have more to feel secure and ready to move. Maybe you've experienced that once or twice.
Yes, maybe I
Okay.
have.
And then so here's the fun interplay because these lines always have relationships. The 5 line, which is the conscious line, often people are just more aware of the essence of that, is the line, the 5 line is often called the karmic mirror. And I also think of it as a really strong teacher and leadership line. And you mentioned, how does my design factor into my teaching in the world? And your 5 line basically is raising its hand, going, I'm here to show people a new way. I've got thoughts, follow me if you want to. And the best thing I can say to anyone who has a 5 line is people will love you, people will judge you, none of it matters, just go. Your job is to be a neutral, knowing leader and teacher. Like to trust that you know what you know and not need people to get it, not need people to whatever, because people will project on you what they need for their own growth and development.
Oh,
That's the
yeah.
karmic mirror part. So if they see you as a savior, then their learning is about deferring their power. If they see you as the worst person who's ruining all the things and doing it wrong, it's because there's some sort of judgment in them that needs to be reflected back. I'm making all of this up, but
Sure, sure.
it's not about you, is basically what I'm saying. And your job is just go, we're going this way, people. Art, activism, love. If you're into that, let's go. And I hear you doing that. So I wanted to reflect that and add one more thing because I can't help myself. I was called intuitively right before we got on this call to look at your Mercury gate. And one of the things we look at in the chart, there's all these different gates, I know the lingo, but they all point to different things that connect to how we're meant to resonate most powerfully in the world, personally, professionally. Your Mercury gate is gate 59. I know this one well because it's in my relationship sequence in the gene keys, and it's the gate of intimacy. So your Mercury, what you're here to say, that's what our Mercury gate points to, that is most resonant is essentially come here, share with me your your truth, the good, the bad, the fugly. I'll do it too, and we're going to make that a safe container for all to be witnessed. So there's this energy of we're going to be more transparent. And you probably do that with your people, I'm guessing, of like, here's my project, here's what I'm scared of, here's what I'm working with. And that's how you open doors to people's evolution and to your own teaching and leadership. So I thought that was really beautiful, given what your work is, that you're here to speak to intimacy, the transparent human experience of caring and loving and trying and all of those things.
I do love all that. And even like talking about making art as being intimate with the
Yeah,
world and intimate with life and
yeah,
why I do it. It's a act of intimacy, how to be intimate with color, all this. So thank you so much for that. That was so fun to hear that. And
yeah. Yeah, and leading with intimacy because the other side of So if you're looking at a chart, gates connect to others. They're almost like these little highways in between them. And 59 connects to gate 6, which means that chances are you will also have experiences where you connect with people who aren't comfortable with your full sharing and transparency and have a reaction. And so it's also a sense of modeling, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to regulate my nervous system regardless of what people think or project on me. And what a gift. What a gift of leadership to the world to say, I'm keeping my heart and myself open. And I'm building a skill set to do that even when the world reacts to that, even when people have their own feels about that. So I just feel the energy of love as you talk about what you're doing and through the lens of your design, which is really beautiful. It's fun to have the opportunity to reflect that back to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. You've given me so much to think about and explore. So I
Yeah.
will go out and learn more about that because
Yeah, that one
learning
line.
more is
That
what
one
I
line's like, now
do.
I got to get a PhD in that shit.
Learning more is what I do.
Yeah. Well, I would love to give you an opportunity to share how people can connect with you. It will be in the show notes, but I think it's also nice for people to hear what you're up to in your own words and how they can stay in connection with you.
Yeah, so thank you. And my website is sarahbushartworks.com, and that's SARAHBUSH, artworks, plural.com. And that's where you'll see a lot of my artwork and short videos about what I make. And then I have a weekly newsletter called The Pink Teacup. And that's the URL for that, though, is sarahbush.substack.com. And you can check that out and see if it resonates, and where I talk a lot about the imagination and my own practice and also whatever's on my mind each week, but through that lens of how our imaginations can help save the world and how we can access that for ourselves
Mm.
and being all in, like this is your life,
Yeah.
go be all
Beautiful.
in.
Well, here's to imagination as an act and a practice of love and activism. I am here for it, and I am so glad to share this conversation with the world. I think we need it.
Well, thank you so much. I just loved all your insights as well. It was such a great conversation.